I've always been in love with the idea of storytelling. So seeing that filmmaking meant meticulous planning, writing, and arranging, while film viewing meant telling a story through both see and hear in the easiest way possible, I was mesmerized. It was even furthered when I first saw the 2012 film Hugo, which is by one of today's greatest directors, Martin Scorsese. Not only did the film introduce me to my lifelong love for Asa Butterfield, but it also gave me my first insight into the world of filmmaking. With gorgeous cinematography and stunning storytelling, this historical fiction is about what happened to one of the world's foremost filmmakers, George Méliès, after the Great War. Film critic Emmanuel Levy said that Hugo was Scorsese's love letter to cinema, and I wholeheartedly agree. Ever since seeing Hugo, I have become more critical and observant towards movies that I consume, looking for details that would make a film a masterpiece, as well as looking out for problems within its story or production. I had quite lost touch with my filmmaking romance, but it was reignited when our course, Introduction to Communication, delved into film history. I'm kind of glad to say that I'd known a lot of that information in that chapter because, not to brag, I am still the undefeated top 1 film history player in the Philippines on the Quiz Up app. Cinema gives its audience access to what is inaccessible in real life, the inner workings of the lives and the world of people you do not know, as an outsider looking in. But when it all boils down to it, film is simply storytelling, seeing people move like they're in their own world. Above all else, movies have the power to tell stories, which is what Georges Méliès first discovered and revolutionized back in the early 20th century. The notion of storytelling through the lens of a camera, which is now common at the touch of every fingertip on earth, is fascinating. That is also one reason I fell in love with film. There is no formula for the perfect film. And while technology has made many movies better storytellers in the details, this mere concept of just telling a story means that everyone can be a filmmaker, for films large and small. Additionally, compared to other media where information is usually told and understood, movies often showed, is heard, and is felt. Its production and presence on the big screen makes it a grandeur event, but its subtle messages of life in a more private viewing makes it intimate. Films also mirror the life of many people, which is why people are so drawn or even attached to certain movies and even scenes where they can put themselves in the shoes of the characters on screen, which is the most effective filmmaking. The fact that many movies aren't as well shot as others, yet are exponentially more successful than higher production films, just proves that once the storytelling prevails, no amount of special effects can fix that. Storytelling is about its elements, and so films are about the details. The simplicity of the idea of filmmaking, compared to the meticulous nature of the rest of its production, is quite ironic, and further proves that cinema is an art form in the highest kind. As the author Rainbow Rowell wrote, art wasn't supposed to look nice, it was supposed to make you feel something. While films are not as essential as communication itself, they are important to humans and culture. Movies can offer an escape from reality, a relief from the real world's problems. Fiction shows the world what life can be in fantasy or what the world could be when technology reaches beyond imagination. On the other hand, movies can become humanity's guidelines to life. Even in those fantasy or sci-fi films, there are underlying tales of realism, like slices of life in a make-believe cake. Friendship, family, romance, social issues, unexplored philosophies, and even possible horrors when power or technology is abused. But as cinema has become the forefront of media, it has become one of the most important mediums of information. The world has turned to films for life advice. Films have begun to show real people and real situations, may it be through tales of unlikely strengths and exceeding expectations, through scenes of love and heartbreak, sometimes even told with comedic undertones, through discussions on difficult issues that would otherwise be taboo in social conversations, through the horror one might encounter, either naturally or supernaturally, through revamped epics of history, through the thrills of extraordinary circumstances, and even through heartwarming stories that inspire everyone to live life just a little bit better. Especially with the birth and peaked interest of documentaries, films now humanize figures that the world has deemed untouchable and realize problems, both global and small scale, which seem so much like a chapter taken from a dystopian novel. So, with all that content within the structure of a film, when people watch movies to relax and enjoy, they end up learning after a few hours of watching. And with that said, films educate as they entertain or excite or even frighten. In the most general sense, the communication model that can be found in film media is the linear model, which represents the flow of intrapersonal communication. Filmmakers put out final products for critics and moviegoers alike and wait for their opinions, and so they cannot do anything to change what they have filmed once it receives any negative feedback. Cases of backlash serve as a lesson to not just the cast and crew, but also to the audience and to fellow filmmakers as well. Although films communicate intrapersonally and forge indirect bonds between filmmaker and watcher, they do inspire interpersonal conversations between viewers, may it be in criticism of the movie or because they saw reflections of themselves on screen. And getting even more technical, there are many media theories that apply to the creation and projection of film. But the one that sticks out best is the social cognitive theory. A study has even said that people do learn from what they observe on a day-to-day basis, and part of that experience is watching films. People are more likely to develop changes in their behavior or their lives entirely based on the observations that they have had from their hours of film exposure. This data proves that cinema truly affects its viewers, and so filmmakers must do everything to cater to their global audience. So, even if the film industry as a whole is such a lovable and admirable entity, there's no denying that it is far from perfect. There is still so much room for improvement, especially in terms of proper representation, may it be cultural, racial, or just ridding of stereotypes perpetuated by the social psyche or the media. No matter how people deny it, cinema influences the world because it is integrated in modern culture. The lack of people of color and cultural representation in international film has long been an issue in global cinema. Films are supposed to realistically mirror the times that they are set in, and so to not include POC in them would imply that diversity did not exist until the last 20th century. Although many movies today try their best to tell stories from a new perspective, with a conventionally underrepresented and more diverse cast like Crazy Rich Asians, Hustlers, and even Black Panther, cinema still has a long way to go until realistic diversity and proper cultured representation is the theatrical norm, rather than just a marketing strategy.